Welcome. My name is Trey. I will be moderating throughout the call today. We have Lacey on the call who will be giving our presentation on 2024 merchandise plan workflows and best practices, especially as we start thinking about any preseason or next year planning. Lacey, if you want to jump to the next slide, we can dive in. So like I said, my name is Trey. I'm one of the solutions consultants on the team. I've been with the company for about 3 years now. So going through this, or about 2 years now, adding an extra year in there. Going through this, we're going to go through some of the workflows related to merchandise plan today. As some housekeeping reminders, we have a Q&A section in this webinar. As you're going through this, throw in your company name so that we can be sure to keep track and reach out after the process if there's any follow-ups that are needed. Again, this information will only be seen by the moderator, so it'll only be seen by myself. We'll go through some quick context and demonstrations for these workflows, and then any questions that either don't get answered or are still outstanding, we'll go through at the end. We'll have about 20-30 minutes of content, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end with the purpose of sharing some examples of what we see retailers doing and providing scenario best practices as we think about planning 2024. Lacey, I'll hand it off to you.
Awesome. So I'll be taking you through the workflows today. I've also been at Toolio about 2 years, spent the first 10 years of my career in planning and merchandising at TJX. Today, I head up our solutions department. So pre-sales, working with a lot of you through the demo process, getting you familiar with the tool, and then post-sales, managing the training process as well. So getting customers up and running in the tool. For today, we're going to be running through that 2024 workflow. So for our current customers, this will be a great workflow that you can take back and do in your own time within the tool. For our prospective customers that are on the call, this will really highlight the ease and the flexibility of Toolio and how it's just such a time-saving solution when it comes to what you're working in today, which is typically Excel. Before we dive in, I do just want to highlight a few things. So just to familiarize ourselves with some of the vernacular, as a reminder, we highlight this almost every webinar, is the view that you're working in is in the top right. So that's how the data is organized. And then the scenario is in the views in the top left, scenario is in the top right. So that's the plan data. So we're going to be going through that again in a little bit more, but just when I say view versus scenario, you'll understand. So what we'll go through today is a quick overview of Toolio's merchandise plan module. Again, for our new customers, just to familiarize yourself with it. We'll then go into a workflow that will include tops-down forecasting across multiple plan years, receipt planning for current and future time periods, accurate inventory projections using current EOPs as well as future plans. And we're also going to do some plan comparison using scenarios. Great. So to start, we are going to start, let me zoom in a little bit, in our merchandise planning module. This is where we'll be working all of today. So just as a quick reminder on some of Toolio's features and functions, what you see here looks and feels a lot like Excel. You can still highlight, get your sums and averages. You can copy and paste out of Toolio into Excel. Any view we go through is exportable. But where we are much stronger than Excel is that automatic actualization. So we're pulling in your sales, inventory, on order, receipt, and product data automatically each day into the tool. In that automatic actualization, in conjunction with the calculations embedded within Toolio, leave you with a robust list of metrics and variants to evaluate your business. So we'll be playing with some of these metrics today. We'll be going through plan info, actualized info to make a lot of decisions, just trying to get you familiar with what you're looking at. So in this view, we are looking at 2023. And you can see February through November have been actualized. That's indicated here where it says act/plan. And December, Jan is your remaining plan. You can break this out on 2 separate lines. For today's purposes, we're just going to keep it on 1 line. So more of a forecast type line, taking those actuals, remaining plan, give you a total plan for the year. Toolio is built off that attribute-based hierarchy. So as a reminder, traditional merch hierarchies are division, department, class, typically in that order. But within Toolio, you do have the capabilities to reorder these, slice and dice them different ways. So if I wanted to look at my departmental sales by class, I could. My classes of knits, and then my departments within. For today, we're going to keep it in that division department class order. Actually going to pin these to the left so as we go through that workflow. I also want to mention that we're currently grouped by month. We're going to be flipping through a few groupings week, quarter, so you'll see how this works. And right now we're looking at the plan year of 2023. But for today, we're actually going to look at a custom time frame. So let's start by looking at the last 12 weeks in the next 26 weeks of sales. So basically 3 months back, 6 months forward, all within one view. That now adjusted my view. So you can see that I have my fiscal year 23 ending in January, fiscal year 24 starting in February, but still all within one view. Again, this is where we're manipulating the view in this situation. We're still working in that same master scenario. So those are just some of the reminders of the features, functions within the tool. We're now going to dive into the workflow that we'll be going through today. So it's how do we change this plan information to better match our needs today. So I'm quickly going to jump into another view just to show you. So we're now looking at our in-season planning master versus our 2024 budget. This view is comparing two scenarios. So I'm in my master and I'm also showing my 2024 budget. You can see today, these two plans match exactly. So there's no variance between the plan and my budget. So for my inventory, my sales, margins are the exact same. My receipts are the same, weeks of supply. These plans are equal because I have seeded my budget into my master and I'm going to be manipulating my master today. The result of the workflow we go through today, we'll have two different plans. The budget will stay the same because I'm not manipulating that, and where my master scenario is what I'll be manipulating. And then we'll come back here at the end to compare the two. Okay, let the fun begin. Time for the workflow. So as you can see, reminder, we're looking at October through May, October, November, part of December has been actualized. And then I have my plan for the remainder of the year. So looking at this, I have been performing up about 37% in October and November over last year. Can drill into that comp to see how that's looking at the division department class level. Looking at January, I have some plans in there. We're planned a little bit more conservatively than where that trend has been at up about 18. And if I look at February and beyond, everything is flatlined at an up 15 over last year. That's because I've seeded these plans. I've built out a baseline here. We go through seeding in some of our previous webinars, but what that does is take a historical source as your plan for future. So I seeded in an up 15 when I did this initially. That's why it's flat across all levels of my hierarchy. So to drill in quickly, I want to actually look at this weekly just to see a better glimpse into how that trend has been looking at a weekly level. So again, pin this to the left so I can just scroll over. So you can see we're in week 46 here. This is still plan information. And we have been trending at an up about 37% as a total company the last few weeks. Started this time period a little softer at about an up 31. Looking at this by time period or by hierarchy, women's is really driving this pickup at where, and then men's and kids. So you can see there's different trends within each level of the hierarchy. And that's what we're going to be using to forecast out. So I'm going to quickly go back to that monthly view. And we're going to run that forecast function. So what we're going to do now is run our forecasting function, which will generate tops down forecasts for all levels of my hierarchy. So division, department, class, even channel, because that is built into my hierarchy subclass, they're not exposed in this view, but they're still going to get a tops down forecast generated for them. So I'm going to do that by right clicking and running the function forecast. Starting in the time frame, this defaults to the time frame I'm looking at. So this week through the next 26 weeks, which is week 19. I actually only want to forecast through Q1. So I'm just going to quickly adjust this to go through week 13 instead of 19. You can always change the time you're forecasting for. I'm forecasting into that master scenario because that's what I'm working in currently. When forecasting, you're forecasting two things: your seasonality curve or groups, and then the volume. So when do your sales peak and valley? What do your month over month, week over week builds look like? And then what volume do they apply to that? When doing this, you can choose what level you want these seasonality curves to go to. So looking at this example of division, department, class, that means every class within each department, within each division will have their own seasonality curve that's different from one another. If I removed class from this, this means the seasonality curves would only be at that departmental level. So we saw our departments are footwear, accessories, clothing. All that same curve would apply to all classes. So within footwear, boots, sneakers, dress shoes would all have the same seasonality curve. Probably not the level I want to go to. On the opposite example, say I removed division, this would apply the same seasonality curve across all classes and departments. So boots would have one seasonality curve regardless of the division. So women's boots, men's boots, and kids' boots would all have the same seasonality curve. Again, I want that division in there, so I'm going to add it back. So this is choosing to what group do you want to apply your seasonality curves, the method of your seasonality curve. So I'm going to say my sales history of my trailing 52 weeks. So basically just taking that historical seasonality curve and rolling it forward. And I'm going to do a 1 week rolling average. This is going to not smooth out any big spikes or drop-offs I have in sales. The reason I'm choosing 1 week is we're going into such a crucial time period with shipping cutoffs and then markdowns coming up that were anniversarying from last year. So I want those spikes in sales to remain there. If I wanted to smooth them out, I could choose 2 or 4 or 8 weeks. And then for volume, what volume do I want to apply to this seasonality curve? So as you saw, over the last 8 weeks, we were trending up about that 36, 38% over last year. But when I expanded back and looked at the beginning of that time period, so the last 12 weeks, those first few weeks were only up about 31, 32%. I want to make sure I'm keeping those softer sales into consideration, not just that high volume of those last 8 weeks of my trend. So I'm going to do a trend of the last 12 weeks when forecasting out. So again, we're forecasting to generate top line plans. If you're familiar with our item planning module, this is really similar to what we have in there, but this is within our merchandise plan to forecast. So now I'm going to run the forecast function. So I'm generating a forecast through Q1 based off of that. So now you can see drilling in through Q1 or April of this year, we have a little bit more accurate plans than that up 15 that was across the board that we had in all of 2024. So you can see women's continues its trend around up 20, clothing averaged out to about an up 39, footwear and accessories, and then within men's, apologies, I had only highlighted women's when I ran that forecast. We're just going to go back and run it one more time for the whole company. So you could saw that men and kids were not forecasted. That's because I only had highlighted the women's role when I forecasted. Okay, so now we have forecasts in men's and kids. Across the board. So now we have newly forecasted sales through Q1 based off of our trend of where we've been. And again, forward looking, and it did it through all of May, which is totally fine. So going through, we now want to continue to adjust those plans without using that forecasting methodology. So I'm going to expand this to look at all of 2024. And I'm actually going to group it by quarter, just so it's a little bit easier to look at. So again, Q1 is forecasted. We ended up forecasting that first month of Q2, but then Q3 and Q4 are just at that flat up 15%. So I do want to do some adjustments there. So this is where I'm going to use locking and spreading to do that. So looking at women's, you can see it's outpacing a little bit, but I want to lock my total sales in place that I have planned. So I'm going to lock at the time period. Oops, actually going to lock the attributes. So that locks the top line, and I'm going to shift funding between attributes. So I want to take some funding out of kids in particular and put more funding into women's. So what I'm going to do is just copy this trend of about up 20 across. And that took the funding out of men's and kids to push it into women's. Again, men's, I might want to move across as well, uptrend that one a little bit, because I'm only locked at the top line. It is going to potentially adjust my women's line. So I'm going to actually remove that lock. And now I feel good about my women's plans. So I'm going to lock women's into place and adjust men's to be at maybe an up about 35. And again, women's is locked. So it's only adjusting kids to do that. So lots of different options when it comes to locking and spreading to adjust your plans. You can also do this within time periods. So just to show you a quick example of what that could look like is I want to lock this total plan at that 235 million. So I am going to lock the time, but I want to put a little bit more emphasis on Q4 of next year. So my goal for Q4 of next year is to sell 65 million. Again, that's going to take the funding out of the other time periods, push it into Q4 while still keeping that 235 locked at that total level. So you can see now Q4 is a little bit more aggressively planned. So we have forecasted sales in Q1, some adjustments in Q2, 3, and 4. Overall, I'm feeling better about the shape of my plan, specifically at the divisional level where we just did those adjustments. Before we get into this receipt planning workflow, I do want to pause and see if there's any questions so far.
Not yet, Lacey. It looks like we are good to keep moving on.
Great. All right, so I am back. Again, same view. I just changed this to now look at it monthly. Pin that to the left. And actually, I'm going to remove the departments in class just so we can look at this a little bit cleaner. Not that removing those groupings, attributes doesn't change any plan information. It's just how we're slicing and dicing what we're looking at here. All right, so now we want to get back into some receipt plans. So scrolling down to my open to buy section of my in-season planning view, you can see that I have on order placed through March. So about 3.3 million remaining in on order in December, 13, Jan, 12, Feb, and then a lot of receipts coming in March at 31 million. Currently, let's just focus on that March time period. My receipt plan was 18.4 million, which means I'm currently showing an overbought of about 12.7 million. So have more placed than I was planning on bringing in, which gives me a negative open to buy or overbought position. Again, I can drill in and see where that's coming from. Mostly women's and men's, they're both overbought about 6 million with only 700,000 coming from kids. So because I'm placed through March, these orders are committed. So I'm going to run a function in Toolio called flow on order to receipts. That's going to make my on order actuals, what I have placed on my books, match my receipt plan. But I only want to do this through that March time period because obviously I haven't placed Q2 yet. April, May, June still does not have on order against it. I want those receipt plans to stay as they are. So I'm going to highlight that time period of December through March, right click and choose the function flow on order to receipts. So as you can see, it's going to do that for weeks 46 through week 9. Week 9 is March ending. We're on a 4-5-4 calendar. So Feb has 4 weeks, March has 5 weeks. So week 9 ends at the end of March. And we're not filtered to anything, so our view isn't. So it's going to run this function of making our receipt plans match our on order for all levels of our hierarchy, division, department, class category. Again, we're only exposed at the divisional level here, but it's going to do it at all levels. So now I'm going to generate. So generating those receipt plans to match my on order. Scrolling back down, you can see my open to buys are now 0 across the board in Jan, Feb, March. That 31 million receipt plan marries up with that 31 million in on order. So now looking, I want to take those receipt plans and using those receipt plans, take my current planned inventory to get a better projection of what my inventory position is going to be. So obviously my BOP for December has been actualized. Going forward, this is planned inventory. So I want to take my new sales that I've forecasted, lay them up against my BOP, my beginning inventory position, utilize my new receipt plans that I've just generated to get an accurate look at our inventory. So I'm going to do that by turning on auto generate inventory. This used to be a function that you could run, which you can still do, which will just be a one-time push to generate that inventory. But we've now released it so you could keep that on. So if you are doing a workflow like we're going to do, that you're creating inventory plans, you can have that auto generate on. So now that took those sales plans I forecasted, adjusted, again, laid them up against my receipts to then project out my inventory. So we now want to look again at the remaining few months of the year to maybe make some receipt plan adjustments, because this is the receipt plans that are in here for April and beyond are just based off of what I had seeded in. So I'm just going to clean up this view a little bit so we can see our sales, inventory, and receipts all in one view without me scrolling up and down. So quickly just going to remove some metrics from this view. Again, this isn't going to change my sales information. This is strictly what am I going to look at within here. So I just want to look at my planned sales at retail and maybe my units, just trying to clean it up a little bit. All right, great. So now we have our BOP at the top, our planned sales, and our receipt plans all within one view. I actually want to get my weeks of supply in there, so I'm even going to remove some of those open to buy metrics just to see it a little bit cleaner. This isn't permanently adjusting the view. I'm going to reload it at the end and all of these metrics will be back. It's just so we can look at this right now. Perfect. All right. And again, as a reminder, I have that auto generate inventory on. In the months through March, we like these receipt plans. They're married to our on order plans, but I want to look forward to adjust some of these receipt plans And I'm going to do that by adjusting my weeks of supply units. And I want to make sure when I adjust my weeks of supply units that my receipt units go up or down. So my BOP stays the same, my sales stay the same, but my receipts within that month are going to go up or down. So I'm going to choose that as my output. So again, looking at that weeks of supply unit line, you can see in the month of April, 26 weeks of supply feels a little high. We bring in a lot of our spring receipts in March. We're bringing them in earlier than we did this year. So I want to adjust this down to 22 weeks of supply. That in turn adjusted my receipt plan. You can see that's indicated here. If I click, it was 15, it's now about 5 million. And it also adjusted my BOP for May. So rolling forward, as I adjust those receipt plans, my future inventory is also going to be adjusted. So it was 78, and now my BOP for May is 67. Looking forward, again, you can do this at a lower level. So is there any call outs by division potentially? Maybe I want kids to turn a little bit faster. So in particular, I want to drop down my kids' weeks of supply, definitely in that month of August. So just making a few adjustments. As I'm doing that, my receipts are recalculating, my inventory is recalculating, my sales plans here are not moving at all. So that's how I can use my weeks of supply to make future receipt and inventory plan changes. I'm going to save that down. We're only 2 minutes left, but luckily we're almost done. So overall, what we just went through is we forecasted our sales through Q1. We also, through that time period, flowed our on order to receipts. So to make our committed on order match our receipt plan. We did some adjustments to our future sales. So Q2, 2, 3, and 4 in terms of top line sales using locking and spreading. We also then adjusted our inventory and receipt plans using weeks of supply and that auto generate inventory function. So overall, this is a completely different plan than what we started with. So I want to go back to that first view. I'm going to reload this. So our master plan is what we were updating, that budget. And if you remember, they were matched exactly before. So now you can see, based off of all of those functions that we reforecasted, we actually added about 46% of opportunity to our plan compared to our budget. So that looks like about a $16 million jump. Sorry. So, and you can see within the months where that is coming from. Again, so that's for your inventory. For your sales, sorry, we added about 8% of opportunity. Apologies there. So that was about a $14 million increase on the plan, majority coming in Q4. If you remember, we added more opportunity in Q4. Looking at our margins, we didn't do any really playing around with margins here. It is slightly different. That's based off of the penetrations planned by departments, classes, categories, division. And then our receipt plans here. You can see those adjustments up or down to our receipts and how those then cause a change from our initial plan or budget to that master plan that we just reforecasted. And then lastly, our weeks of supply. So the new plan we created, we're planned to turn a little bit faster than that initial weeks of supply, which obviously makes sense based off of some of those adjustments. So I know that was a lot of information in a really quick amount of time. Like I said, for current Toolio customers, if this is a workflow you want to do on your own time, we'll be sending this out so you can pause, stop, and break it down on your own. For prospective customers, hopefully this highlighted just the ease of tool and how you can very quickly reforecast your plans, compare plans together, use some of those functions within the tool that just make these processes much faster than they are in Excel. So with that, Trey, any questions that came in?
Not right now, but as a reminder, feel free to use that Q&A section of your Zoom to throw in any questions and we can get those answered.
my share. I don't think we have any questions. All right, awesome. I hope everyone found this helpful. Like I said, if you have any questions about specific workflows or yourself, feel free to reach out to your CSM or account executive that you've been working with on the Toolio side. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.